So this is something that's been really bothering me of late, and that is the propensity of gamers, or at least the gamers that come on to YouTube and other outlets of social media, to love everything that they play. And yeah, it's not just gamers, it's movie reviewers, it's people who like any kind of aspect of geek culture, largely seem to like everything they buy or otherwise consume. And maybe this is just kind of the Christmas season. You're watching YouTube videos. You're trying to figure out, is this particular product any good? Is this game any good? And you come upon just wave after wave of people who love everything. For example, if you looked at the Last Guardian reviews from a lot of the large outlets, except for, I think, that Jim Sterling, that British guy who has a reputation for being quote-unquote negative, every outlet loved The Last Guardian. They gave it between an 8 and a 10. But yet if you read the review, a lot of the stuff that they were saying was not overtly positive, but they skewed it in that way. Oh, the animal, whatever it's called, Trico, is hard to control, and it actually, you get the sort of answer to a puzzle right, and the thing doesn't respond the way it should. So you sit there wondering, oh, did I do something wrong? And you backtrack a lot. And everyone said, well, yeah, it could be a problem, but it's just the way an animal behaves. Things like that. Excuses like that. Everyone loves Final Fantasy 15, the Star Wars movie. I mean, and everyone's going crazy about this new Star Wars movie, and it's just an interesting phenomenon when you think about it. Now, obviously, one of the problems on YouTube is that a lot of these bigger channels are, sponsored by this game or that game, so they're not going to obviously say anything bad when there's a financial relationship there. On the other hand, I think if you have a channel like that, even if you're not being directly sponsored by a particular game, you're kind of incentivized, whether you realize it consciously or not, to be a kind of cheerleader for the video game industry or a cheerleader for the tech industry. So even if you do here or there pick out a potential problem, you can just sort of gloss over that in the whole scope of the review. And now, not every game gets this treatment. It seems like the big AAA games largely get this kind of massive, broad-based, positive reception. But niche games, I'm thinking of, JRPGs typically get panned for adhering to the conventions of JRPGs. Now, could it be that the niche Japanese JRPG publisher developer is not paying off the outlets in the same way that the Western AAA developers and publishers do? I'll leave that to the listener to muse about. But what I think the bigger problem in all of this is that by not being critical, by being just this mass of consumers who love everything with which they're presented, you kind of get to a point where the developer has no incentive to do anything different. The movie director, the studio. I mean, how many of these Marvel superhero movies do we have? And they're just churning them out one after the other, and we all seem to love them, no matter how outlandish the plot, no matter how just repetitive all of the action gets, we just eat them up. So there's no incentive ultimately to innovate if you know that you have a captive base of consumers who will lap up everything you throw at them. And that's really not the way journalism or criticism should be. I mean, I think no matter how much you love a product, you should be able, in the same review, to point out its flaws and have those flaws count in the overall scope of the review. Similarly, I just always thought it was odd when somebody loves everything. If you consider yourself to be a critic of movies, books, video games, whatever it is, and yet you offer no criticism, it raises doubt about your credibility. And I know people like Happy Console Gamer, he came on to try, he said this in many interviews, said it in the interview that I did with him, he wanted to kind of counteract that angry video game nerd thing, so he deliberately tried to be positive. I'm not talking about those intentions necessarily, but just YouTube videos, click after click. I was looking at sound cards, I was looking at some speakers, I was looking at a couple different software programs and obviously games, and it just seemed like every YouTube video I clicked on, everyone loved these things. You need to be able to offer a critical perspective, and you need to be able to call a game or a product out when it is legitimately bad or when it's lazy. And I think what a lot of the video game community doesn't realize is by not doing that, by kind of rolling over, by accepting what we are given in a lot of instances, we're just making it very easy for the developer to do nothing. Now, you're going to say, and I can hear the criticism perhaps forming in your head, oh, well, video game players complain about everything. We complain about DLC. We complain about microtransactions. People hated the Mass Effect 3 story. We got it changed. I get all of that, but in the end, you're still buying the product. In the end, the overall tenor of what you see on YouTube is cheerleading. It's just a kind of paid or even not paid free advertisement for these companies and for these games. And increasingly, and I would say over the past year and a half to 2 years, you're not getting any kind of alternate perspective. We could nitpick this or that. We can be pissed off on Reddit about some little aspect of a game's marketing. But in the end, we buy it and we like it. And you know, it kind of reminds me of when I was in high school, or maybe it was in college, it doesn't matter. I worked at a movie theater for a couple weeks, and there was this one woman, she always came in, she loved every movie, no matter how horrendous the movie was, you know, whether it was The Scorpion King, or, you know, the early rock movies, or Fast and the Furious. 70-year-old woman, what is she doing watching the Fast and the Furious? She loved everything. It became kind of sad. It became pathetic to hear, and that is, I think, where we're heading on YouTube. Just a bunch of people who just feel the need to like something, even if on a more analytical view of a game or a movie or a book, it doesn't really deserve that kind of blanket praise. So my challenge to people who do this for fun or do this for a living is to feel free to be negative. You know, criticism does not imply hostility. Criticism is something natural, it's something healthy, it's something that can help the industry grow, and right now we are incredibly low on it.